Hey guys, welcome back. So now we're jumping back into Avengers Forever, and for this one we take yet another turn from the narrative with how this story begins, but just keep in mind that it's all coming right back around. So with that said, let's get into it. But first, if you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe to catch the spills every week, and don't forget to hit that bell up top so we can squad up in the comments for the first hour. Alright, so for this one, we start off with day 1 in what would appear to be a type of prison with a variant of Steve Rogers who's not really sure how he got here. And really with the way that this is set up, it's more of a Squid Game type of situation, or closer to something of that nature than it would be to an actual prison. But as soon as he wakes up, he walks out of his room to where then we see that there are a number of rooms here, but they're all open. None of them have doors. So as Steve walks out, he's like, "Hello, is anyone here? My name is Steve." And right away the guy in the next room's like, "You know, that's funny. My name is Steve too." And the funny thing is, between the two of them, they really just think that they just happen to have the same name. So without them really noticing that they're variants of one another, they naturally try to figure out where they are and how did they get there without so much as picking up on the first hint. But then it's here as this Squid Game. This story continues. It's here where the doors that lead into the population area swing open, but as they do, it's very dark on the other side, no one's coming in, and Steve number 1 is like, "Hello, like, is anyone there?" But then right away, Steve number 3 comes running out of his room and he goes racing straight through that open door, screaming death to the warmongers. But at this point, with the Florida man looking Steve racing out, Steve number 3, and he's not really a Florida man, he's from California, but we'll talk more about him in a little bit. But with him racing through this opening door, Steve number 2, he starts to get scared, and we come to find out that prior to this, he was in a quote-unquote nervous hospital. So for Steve number 2, with him being here, it reminds him a lot of how it was for him back home. But just after this, Steve 1 and 2 hear a dog bark, and aside from the both of them, this is the third Steve that they're aware of. And really it's here where it starts to get very uncanny for them, because now they got a dog named Steve. But then from here, only moments later, they hear an excruciating scream outside of the door, which is then shortly after followed by the sound of a taser and Steve number 3 getting thrown right back in. But then it's here where we get a comment from Steve number 5, with number 4 being the dog. And 5 says that 3 is not dead, he's just stupid. But then next, when the door shuts, Steve number 5 tells Steve number 1 to ask number 3 what he saw. And it's here where number 3 just goes on to tell them that he saw obstacles. He climbed over a few, lights were flashing, then somebody hit him who he never saw coming. But then just after this, we then go over to day 2, where the entrance door opens again and Steve number 3 just goes running out full speed, only for him to be stopped yet once again and knocked all the way back into the room. And I can't say what or who exactly it was just yet, but I can tell you who it wasn't. This video sponsor, Raid Shadow Legends, which is one of the biggest turn-based MMORPGs out right now, with it having close to 700 champions as well as over a dozen factions to choose from, with new champions and new updates dropping every single month. But this month in particular is a special one because Raid is celebrating its 4th birthday. So for the dinner party, I'll be inviting Queen Eva of the Dark Elves, Cavalax of the Knights Revenant, Gentoro of the Shadowkin, and for my 4th, I'ma have to go with Nekret the Great because I got a feeling he's gonna eat light. And to make it special, Raid's doing dedicated offers as well as free gifts for both new and existing players. And on top of that, they have a brand new fusion event where you can get your hands on an anniversary themed legendary character. And for Amazon Prime members, don't forget to pick up your Savage Artifact Pack, which is available from March 2nd to March 30th. So don't wait and miss your rewards. They're already yours, you just gotta claim them. And for new players, you can use my link in the description or scan my QR code so you can jump in right away with Epic Champion Kellen the Shrike, along with energy refills, magic potions, and XP brews. But then for all new and existing players, once you're in game, after clicking on the links, just enter promo code 4YearsRaid to get 4 legendary skill tomes and a ton of other useful stuff. So make sure and hop into Raid Shadow Legends while these offers last. But on day 2, with Steve number 3 getting knocked back inside once again, it's here where he more or less just lays there and he tells the other Steves that they're all cowards. But with number 3 saying this, number 5, the one who hasn't so much as stepped out of his room, tells him that that's not the case, but instead some of us are something much worse. To where then the next day, Steve number 3 yells out, "My name is Steve Rogers and I'm a political prisoner because I refuse to take part in your illegal war. You fascists will not break me." To where then the door opens and he goes for it again. But at this point, Steve number 1, he's just like, none of this makes sense. This is weird. all of us are named Steve Rogers. But then Steve number 2 tells him that he had a conversation with the dog, Steve number 4. And he told Steve number 2 that none of them are in their right universe, which right there gets them closer to figuring out what exactly is going on here. But then next, Steve number 1 asked number 2 what was the last thing that he remembered before he woke up here. And for him, it was a usual night crying under his covers, and he knew that somebody was in his room, but even still he couldn't see them. And the next thing he knew, he was here. And for Steve number 1, as it turns out, he's a comic book artist. He was drawing pages for Tales of Suspense, but then he heard a car pull up outside, which was rather strange for him because he lives on the 34th floor. But then from here, day after day, after day, after day, Steve number 3 makes multiple attempts and he keeps coming back every time. And over the course of these days, he tells the others that there's only one man standing between them and their way out of here. But then on day 7, Steve number 1 asks number 3 what did he see this time? And number 3 tells him that if he wants to know, he needs to get out there and find out for himself. But after this, when we then go over to day 11, Steve Doggy Dog's all upset. He's telling number 3 not to go because he's gonna get killed. But 3 goes anyway because he'd rather die out there than be stuck in here. But this time when 3 goes, 1 goes with him. Because after all, it's only one guy that they're up against, right? These 2 can take him, right? Wrong, because both of these guys get tased and thrown back in together. And number 3 is telling number 1 like, hey, it was just like I told you, wasn't it? It was fast, you couldn't even see it coming. And 1 lets him know that it was fast, but he did see something. And with saying this, Steve number 1 draws it on the wall to where then the next day and the day after, he tries again, he sees a little more, and he adds the details. But then on day 14, Steve number 4 joins the group, and together they all make their attempts day after day after day. And with time, they start to change up their plan because there's no way this dude can hit all 3 of them. Well, I mean, at least that's the theory. And it was a theory that was quickly proven wrong. And as the days go on, we go to day 17, where Steve number 4 is trying to encourage Steve number 2 and tell him that he's strong, but Steve number 2 just doesn't want to hear it. But then when we go to day 18, Steve number 3 approaches Steve number 5, and he tells him, you know something, don't you? You know what's out there and that's what you're afraid of. But number 5 tells him that he doesn't know what or who's out there. And the only thing that he is afraid of is in here and in his head. But then next on day 19, Steve number 1 goes to have a talk with Steve number 2. And in this talk, he tells him that you can do this. You're stronger than you think. We all know that. We all see it. And I don't understand how or why, but I think the dog was right. We're all the same man deep down inside. So that means if we can be strong, then you can too, because we're all Steves. But you've been through the most, endured the worst, and you still have the biggest heart of any of us. That means you could be the strongest Steve of all. And with hearing this on day 20, Steve number 2 joins the group, but once again, nobody makes it out, and the entire group gets sent back in. But with this happening, Steve number 5 finally comes out of his room. And when he does, he tells these guys that none of them know what they're doing. But he notices that they all have guts. And now with him seeing this, he lets them know that maybe they are more alike than what he thought. And with saying this, he lets the other Steves know that if they tell him everything that they saw, then he'll tell them how to get out of here. And with saying this, number 5, he's got claws popped and everything. But then from here, we go from day 20 to day 33. And with how this is done, it is more or less hinted that within the 13 days, Steve 1 through 4 shared with number 5 everything that they knew, to where then number 5 mapped out the plan of what everyone needs to do every step of the way. But as they make their way through, it begins the same way that number 2 had described it, with there being obstacles first, to where then there's like these platform structures that they gotta jump over. But then here, when we see the group make their way to the point where none of them have been beyond, this time there are 5 people standing in their way. And the next thing that we see from here is 5 silhouettes throwing shields, and Steve number 1 telling the others that it's time to reach out and grab it. And when he says this, all the other Steves put their hands up. And I mean, number 4, he just opens his mouth because, I mean, he doesn't have hands. But it's here when this happens when each and every one of them catch their own shield. And it's in this moment when a voice says, "Congratulations, Steves. You've all passed the first stage of your boot camp. But let me tell you, it's only gonna get harder from here." And as they look up, they see a ton of Captain America variants with what appears to be the Captain America from Marvel Apes, Earth 8101, your Cap Wolf who was turned into a werewolf by Nightshade, amongst a ton of others who then start to trickle in. But with seeing this, Robbie Reyes is kind of like, well, okay, yeah, this is a few people, but this ain't enough, cause a war is coming and they've got to get their numbers up. But nonetheless, they're gonna take this as a win since they got Weapon America to pop his claws again. And from here, the trio then make their way to go to Earth 49978 to recruit another Steve Rogers who was caught in a gamma explosion. And when we go back to Steve number 1's room, we find that what he was drawing on the wall was a shield, with him signing just underneath it, Steve Rogers was here, right next to the tally marks of the 33 days that he was here. And so now real quick, I want to give a special shout out to all the patrons. Thank you guys for all of your support. And for anyone who's new here, who wants some more information on how to support the channel, I got a link below where you can go to patreon.com/Dopespill. But that'll do it for this one, guys. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below, and we'll do it again on the next one. Alright, later.